Hi everybody, this is FM Arne Jochens from chessuniversity.com, and this is the fourth video in our free video series on Endgame Art. For an introduction to this series, please refer to the video titled Endgame Art number 1. In the previous video of this series, we saw an example of an endgame with pawns against a bishop, where the pawns were winning, but I didn't want to leave you with the impression that the bishop is a weak piece when it comes to fighting against pawns. So I want to show you this study here to somewhat redress the balance. This is one of the many masterpieces by the legendary composer Alexei Troitsky, and in this one it is white to move and win. So if you want to try to solve it, feel free to pause the video and think about this position, white to move and win. Okay, so the first two moves shouldn't be difficult here, because surely we cannot afford to lose our pawn. You cannot mate with the bishop alone, right? So we want to keep the pawn, which is under attack by black's pawn here. So we have to play bishop h6 check. Black will play king to g8, because otherwise we could capture on h7. And now black is still threatening to take our pawn, so we have to play g7. So these two moves were forced, but we should note that this is generally not what white wants in this type of position, because now the pawn is blockaded by the black king, and also the black king is very short of squares, because our pawn is controlling these squares, and this means we have to be very careful not to create a stalemate situation here. And black can try for a stalemate right away. For example, he can play e5 here. Okay, now it won't be a stalemate, but still we have to be very careful. For example, if we capture the pawn here, then I believe that black already has what we call a fortress. He can play king f7, in fact he has to, and now I think this is a fortress, meaning that despite our material advantage, we are a full bishop ahead here as white. We have no way to make progress, we have no way to evict the black king from this corner. All we can do is stalemate him. So this would already be a draw. But of course after e5, white should not capture the pawn, so that there is no stalemate, but instead simply play king e6. Now black has to play e4. We can play king to f6. Black has to play e3. And now we can capture the pawn. This is no stalemate because we have just released the h-pawn. So black has to move the h-pawn. And now our bishop can also stop the h-pawn. Note how versatile the bishop is in these lines. h4, it is still no stalemate, even after we capture, because the black king can still come to h7. And now we can play king f7, and our pawn will promote. So that was easy, and this means black should not play e5. This makes it too easy for white. And if black plays e6, this is very similar. Of course we should not capture, because that would be stalemate, but we don't have to. We can play king to d6, and then after king f7 we can play king e5. The king has to go back to g8. We can play king f6, and this will lead to a position we already know from the previous line. e5, king e6, just waiting, e4, king f6, e3, bishop takes e3, and we have transposed to the line we already saw. So moving the e-pawn gives white an easy win, if he is a little bit careful. But what about king f7? Doesn't black have a fortress already in this position? He can always sacrifice the e-pawn, and then we have already seen that this could be a fortress. And in fact, if white now makes a move with the king, say king e5, the king can return to g8. And how is white to make progress? Because king e6 would now be a stalemate. Okay, so this is the key position of the whole study. So if you haven't solved it yet, you may want to try again at this point. Here white has to come up with an extraordinary move. And, well, how can we approach this position? The problem is this fortress where the king always hides on g8 and f7. And this is a fortress, or this could be a fortress, because our pawn is controlling this h8 square. So this means our pawn is actually helping black in these lines. And remember that I said surely we cannot afford to lose our pawn because we cannot mate with the bishop alone. Well, this was not entirely true. Sometimes, in exceptional circumstances, a bishop alone can checkmate the black king. So, turns out this is one of these exceptional circumstances, and here we can play the brilliant move g8 queens. Simply sacrificing the pawn to make sure that the black king will not be stalemated once we approach the corner with our own king. Of course, black has to take. Now we can play king e6. This is no stalemate because we have sacrificed the pawn. The black king can go to h8. Now we can play king to f7. It's still no stalemate because now we have released the e-pawn. So black can move the e-pawn. And we have the final point, bishop g7 checkmate. Brilliant solution, I think, and a brilliant study overall. And also, I think, very useful for the practical player, because this fortress theme is very common in practical endgames, and also, of course, the try to rescue a difficult position with a stalemate resource. And sometimes, as we have already seen in the first video of this series, you can break such a stalemate resource by actually constructing a real checkmate instead. Okay, so that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, everybody. Remember to check out chessuniversity.com, where you find other free content as well. And of course, you can leave a comment below or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you and goodbye.